Some people believe that owning a home means freedom. It's the American dream, right? A place where you can finally relax, make your own rules, and live life on your terms. But for me, that dream quickly became a nightmare. The moment Ellie moved into the neighborhood, she wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of Willow Grove. She had a way of twisting the rules to suit her needs and everyone else be damned. I thought it was just a matter of time before she'd turn her attention to me. And sure enough, it happened one afternoon. As I was sitting on my porch sipping iced tea, enjoying a quiet day after a long week, Ellie appeared, clipboard in hand, ready to ruin the peace once again. What started as a small annoyance quickly escalated into a battle for control. But what Ellie didn't know was that she was about to meet someone who wasn't afraid to fight back, not just for my home, but for the entire neighborhood. As days turn into weeks, Claire's complaints become more frequent and more absurd. It starts with accusations about the placement of garden ornaments and the lack of visual harmony in Dylan's yard. Then, Claire escalates to more serious threats, including parking violations for guests and fines for disturbing the peace when Dylan hosts family barbecues or gatherings. Dylan's frustrations grow as Claire continues to exert her supposed authority over every little detail of his life. One day, Dylan receives a formal $500 fine for something as trivial as a garden hose left out for a few hours. The audacity of Claire's behavior strikes a nerve in Dylan, and he realizes that she is using her position to bully and intimidate others in the neighborhood. It becomes clear that Claire sees herself as the law of Willow Grove. She begins sending threatening letters about fines, pushing the limits of her imagined authority, and even creating a fake HOA police force with the power to intimidate residents. Dylan knows he cannot just let this continue, but rather than react with anger or confrontation, he begins to plot a more strategic course of action. He doesn't just want to stop Claire's harassment. He wants to expose her abuse of power and show the neighborhood who she really is. Dylan's plan is set into motion. He reaches out to Rachel, a trusted friend and lawyer, who specializes in local housing laws. Rachel quickly identifies a significant flaw in the Willow Grove HOA's legal standing. They have never properly filed their governing documents with the county, making their authority legally questionable. With this knowledge in hand, Dylan takes the next step. Knowing Claire will likely show up at the next BBQ he hosts, Dylan invites Rachel and several supportive neighbors to come over. As expected, Claire arrives uninvited and immediately starts wagging her finger at Dylan, holding up a stack of papers like she's making a big legal case. However, this time, Dylan is prepared. Rachel steps forward and reveals the legal documents that prove Claire's HOA has no legitimate authority over his property. Claire tries to deny it, but the facts are undeniable. Rachel presents case law that invalidates Claire's authority over Dylan's home. She even exposes Claire's history of abuse and harassment toward other neighbors, the other residents who have long been afraid to speak out. Rally behind Dylan. Claire tries to brush it off, but the support from the community and the overwhelming evidence is too much for her to handle. In the wake of the confrontation, the HOA board holds an emergency meeting to address the growing concerns about Claire's leadership. With the community's support, the board votes to remove Claire from her position and strips her of any future power within the HOA. The public nature of her downfall is complete. Claire's reign of terror ends not only with her ousting from the HOA, but with a criminal investigation into her past actions. Dylan's quiet strength and careful planning bring justice to the neighborhood. Claire is forced to leave Willow Grove in disgrace, and the community begins to breathe easier, no longer under the oppressive control of a petty, power-hungry leader. As for Dylan, he's not just a homeowner anymore. He's a symbol of standing up against abuse of power. His calm demeanor and strategic thinking have restored peace to Willow Grove, and he's ready to continue living the life he's always dreamed of, with the confidence that he'll never allow anyone to take that away from him again. The story ends with Dylan on his porch, sipping his iced tea, as the neighborhood finally feels like home again, free from the tyranny of a power-hungry HOA president. The days following Dylan's confrontation with Claire felt tense, but Dylan had a new sense of determination. He spent the next few evenings doing research, trying to understand the HOA's powers and the rules he had supposedly violated. Every day felt like a battle as Claire continued her campaign of harassment, sending more violation notices with petty accusations. First, it was about the way his trash bins were positioned. Then it was his fence being a few inches too high. But the most absurd violation came when she claimed that his lawn wasn't uniform enough for her standards. $250. Fine for a slight grass unevenness. Dylan couldn't believe it. Every time he received a notice, his frustration grew. He'd already put up with Claire's behavior for months. But now, he could feel the fight coming to a head. Claire wasn't just being unreasonable. She was targeting him, pushing him to see how far she could go before he caved. It was clear that Claire was used to having her way in the neighborhood, and she wasn't going to let up easily. But Dylan wasn't just going to roll over. He was determined to protect his rights, his home, and his dignity. Every time Claire's notices piled up, he took them straight to Rachel, who was busy gathering evidence. She began uncovering a key flaw. The HOA's bylaws were incomplete and inconsistent, and they had never been properly filed with the county. This gave Claire and her board members a shaky legal foundation, and Rachel saw a loophole, one that could easily be exploited. As Claire continued her relentless assault, Dylan began to notice a change in the neighborhood. Several longtime residents who had been too scared to speak up against the HOA before were now taking sides. They started giving Dylan quiet support, exchanging stories of their own run-ins with Claire. This was no longer just his fight. The whole community seemed to be rallying together, and with Rachel's help, Dylan now had a real chance to turn the tide. He wasn't going to back down anymore, not for Claire, and certainly not for anyone who believed they could push him around. Dylan could feel the tension mounting as the day of the HOA meeting approached. He had made it clear to Claire that he wasn't going to let her walk all over him anymore. His home was his sanctuary, and he was determined to protect it. But now this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the entire neighborhood. Rachel had been working relentlessly on the case, uncovering more and more of Claire's missteps and violations of proper HOA procedures. The evidence was stacking up, and it seemed like the more they dug, the more they found. It turned out that not only had Claire and her board abused their power with fines and harassment, but they had also been secretly embezzling HOA funds to line their own pockets. This wasn't just petty control, it was criminal, and Rachel had enough evidence to take it to the next level. When the night of the HOA meeting finally arrived, Dylan stood outside the community center. The building that had once felt like a symbol of suburban comfort now turned into a place of confrontation. He wasn't alone this time. Several of his neighbors, once hesitant to speak out, now stood with him determined to put an end to Claire's reign of terror. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The room was filled with residents who had finally found the courage to stand up. Some of them had been intimidated for years by Claire's self-imposed authority, but now they were ready to see justice done. Dylan wasn't the only one who had had enough. The people were speaking up, and Claire could feel the walls closing in on her. As Dylan entered the room, his eyes immediately locked with Claire's. She sat at the front of the room, flanked by her loyal board members. Her smug smile faded the moment she saw him walk in with Rachel by his side, a legal briefcase in hand. This was no longer a petty squabble about a lawn or a mailbox. It was about power, and Dylan was no longer the one on the defensive. The room fell silent as Rachel stood up, flipping through her legal documents. Claire tried to maintain her composure, but her hands were shaking, her gaze darting nervously around the room. It was clear she knew her empire was crumbling. The evidence Rachel presented was irrefutable, and the community was finally awakening to the truth. Rachel addressed the board, her voice firm and unwavering. "We have here irrefutable proof of your illegal activities." She began opening the floodgates. "The bylaws you've been enforcing were never properly filed. Your fines have no legal basis, And the embezzling of funds, well, that's going to be dealt with at a much higher level. The look on Claire's face was one of utter shock. She had never expected someone to challenge her authority like this, let alone bring the law into it. And as Rachel continued to speak, Dylan could feel his confidence growing. This was it, the moment where everything changed. The crowd began to murmur. Some residents nodding in agreement, others looking at Claire with disdain. The tables had turned. No longer was Dylan the one being intimidated. This was Claire's reckoning. She had thought she could control everyone with her rules, but now the community was coming together, and the power dynamics had completely shifted. As Rachel continued to lay out the facts, Dylan felt a sense of calm wash over him. This fight wasn't over yet, but they were on the verge of winning. Claire had underestimated the strength of the people she had tried to control for so long. Now it was time for justice to prevail.